Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for this informational meeting for family members as we prepare for back to school fall 2020. And obviously, this is going to be a very different back to school than we've had before. And I just want to start off by expressing the appreciation I have for our entire Sunnyvale School District community as we've gone through this challenging time. I just really, we've had a number of informational meetings, school board meetings, and the tone and the tenor has been so productive and collaborative and positive as we go through so many different permutations and possibilities about what's going to happen for fall 2020. A couple weeks ago, we came to the conclusion, right before the state came to the same conclusion, that we would start with all distance learning to begin. And we're actually branding our distance learning program as virtual school. So you'll hear the term virtual school. When you hear that, that refers to distance learning. This evening, you're going to hear really, well, in fact, it's the exact same presentation that will be presented to the Board of Education on Thursday night. And we also presented the same presentation with a few little differences for our teachers just a few hours ago. So this is very brand new, and it represents hours and hours and hours of thought and work from our entire team and staff. And I've said this before, just when we started working on one plan, conditions changed and we worked on another plan, but this is the plan that we're going to be beginning our 2020 school year with. So you're going to be learning tonight about plans for virtual school, which is the program that the vast majority of our students will be enrolled in to start the school year. We'll also discuss independent study, which is another option that we're very pleased we're going to be able to offer for students. We'll go into that into some detail because it's different. There are a lot of questions about that, and we want to make sure that families that make that selection know what they're selecting and choose it as the appropriate option for their students. Want to talk a little bit about what you may have heard about a state waiver. So what I'll say just up front is the state of California determined that any county that is on the county's or the state's county watch list will be starting school in virtual school or distance learning to start the school year. No students are allowed on campus to start the school year, and that's Santa Clara County. The way a district can get out, can choose to get out of that environment is if the county is off of the list for 14 consecutive days. There's no requirement that a school district would immediately move to more in-person teaching and learning after 14 days off of the list, but that provides an opportunity for school districts to make that choice. During that period, school districts have the option to apply for a waiver. The waiver under the law, as it's written, is only available for elementary school, so it would not apply to our programs at Sunnyvale Middle School or at Columbia Middle School. That's the way the law is written, but it is written to apply for elementary school. At this time, our plan is to begin the school year without a waiver in place. We're going to be exploring the possibility of a waiver, and our thought is if we were to pursue one, it would be very, very limited. So the idea would be that we would start with teachers who were willing to come back to school and families that were willing to send their students back to school on a limited basis as we are sure of our safety protocols and we're sure that we can provide a sound instructional program. So the long and the short of it is we'll be beginning in virtual school to begin the school year, and any students coming back to campus will be very, very slowly likely after we've applied for and received a waiver, and we haven't even begun the application process yet. So that's the waiver. I'm gonna go over our our guiding principles that we've used. And as I said with the staff meeting a couple of hours ago, for different activities, often organizations will adopt guiding principles and refer to them, but often they're words or phrases that are off on a wall somewhere. In this case, I can assure you that we refer to these 4 guiding principles throughout every day. So they are flexibility, equity, high quality teaching and learning, and safety. And those 4 guiding principles, which the Board of Education adopted a couple months ago, really have proved to be versatile. We have to be flexible. So the plans that we're laying out today are going to require flexibility for staff, flexibility for parents, flexibility for students, as individuals, as teams, and then as we adjust to changing conditions, hopefully improving conditions as we move through the school year. We're going to all need to be flexible in environments where we haven't been before. We always will have a focus on equity to make sure that all of our students are able to access curriculum and achieve at high levels of success. And that, as you can imagine, is going to be especially challenging for many students in this environment. For many students, we're confident that they will excel or really succeed at high levels in this environment, but not all. And I suppose that's true of regular school conditions as well. But we're always concerned about equity and making sure that all of our students can succeed. These are different times, and we are committed to high quality teaching and learning, as we always are. What I'm really, really proud, one thing I'm really, really proud of our staff, apart from their flexibility and their positive attitude and their creativity, is their commitment to high quality teaching and learning. And the educational program that your students encountered back in March 16th, which was the first day where we were all distance learning, through the month of April and May and into early June, evolved and improved, and it really improved during our summer session. So the program that your students are going to receive beginning on August 19th, which will be the first day of school, will be a high quality teaching and learning program. We're very proud of that. And we'll continue to grow and to learn. And finally, safety cannot be mentioned enough. And safety is something that we're paying attention to constantly. Personally, I'm in constant connection with the County Department of Public Health, the County Office of Education. Our team is going to lay out some of our safety plans tonight, and they will evolve and flex as conditions warrant, because safety is always our primary consideration. So with that, we are ready to begin our presentation. I should say that if you need Spanish interpretation, interpretation is available. There's a button at the bottom of your screen. It says interpretation. You can choose Spanish or English. And then also, we are also live on Facebook Live, because we may be bumping up against the maximum number of participants in this particular Zoom meeting. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to, I believe Jeremy is first.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Nishihara. I am the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources and Information Services. I'm going to be the first speaker tonight to cover kind of staff survey and parent mailers. We are in communication with all of our employee organizations, as well as attempting to reach out to our parent community to get updated information, given the fact that we are now opening school in the virtual school setting. So just briefly, certificated staff, classified staff, and management are all receiving specific surveys to ask for workforce readiness and assignment preferences. But more importantly is our big parent mailer project that we've been working on over the summer. We are attempting to reach every single household and student and parent in the district with information. The mailing has been going out since mid last week, and we just got the last batch out today. So if you haven't received it yet, don't worry, it's coming. Preschool had its own custom form and specific information, but we really wanted to reach out with 3 pieces of information. There's a cover letter from the superintendent, and then a parent emergency contact update form. This is really the key for what we need to make sure we have updated information for every single parent and family in the district, be it email and phone, so that we can keep everyone connected and information flowing from the district, eventually then from the school site, and then eventually directly from the classroom as we move into virtual school setting. So please, if you receive this in the mail, you can either utilize the very colorful blue self-addressed return envelope, or there is a link online on the website to digitally provide that information. So I encourage everyone to do that so that we can keep you posted with what's coming forward. So again, that's the parent mailer project. And if we have any new parents out there with registration, we've had to flip our registration process to completely virtual. So that information is on the website as well. I thought that was worth covering. So the next section is going to be, I'm going to hand it over to our Chief Operation Officer, Rob Smiley, who's going to cover a little bit of safety. And this really is covering for our staff that's returning to the site. But Rob, I'll hand it over to you now.
And actually, I'm going to jump in because in my eagerness to get started, I forgot to introduce the panel. So the panelists that you see, I'm just going to go the way they're appearing on my screen. So Aaliyah Wilson is our communications manager. I am the superintendent. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Mike Gallagher. Dr. Tasha Dean is our Assistant Superintendent of Student Services. Jeremy introduced himself, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources and Information Systems. Lori Van Gogh is our Chief Financial Officer. Rob Smiley is our Chief Operations Officer. Mala Ahuja is Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services. And Juma Kanungo is a coordinator in our special education department. And Jesus Romero is the executive assistant to the superintendent. And the other two people you see there, Carlos and Charlene, are our translators. And the last thing I should say before we go back to the presentation is that the presentation will take about 20, 25 minutes. And then there'll be lots of time for questions at the end of that. And we intend to end at about 90 minutes. This is about a 90-minute presentation, so at about 7:30. Okay, back to you, Rob.
All right, thank you. All right, good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Rob Smiley. I'm glad to be here with you all tonight. So as Dr. Gallagher mentioned, this is really at this point relative to staff, as we anticipate they'll be the ones on site. However, we do want you to know what is going to be happening at the schools that we look forward to having your kids return to in the hopefully near future. So physical distancing, as you've become accustomed to out in just general life outside of the house. And you know, these guidances will change, or these requirements or safety measures that we have on campus will change based on the latest guidance that we get from both the Santa Clara County Health Department and our County Office of Education. So right now, maintain 6-foot physical distance from all other persons, and that's within reason. You know, if any of you happen to work in a field where there's, you know, labor or anything like that involved, you know, sometimes it's not possible to maintain 6 feet of physical distance if you're team lifting or doing something of that nature. Access to the break rooms and common areas are restricted, and then we'll be having signage advising of the county protocols that are in place. You know, if you've visited restaurants, grocery stores, anything of that nature, you see the COVID prepared check on the front door. You'll see that on the front door of each of our schools and offices throughout the district as well. Hygiene practices. Currently, these hygiene practices will apply to both visitors who, you know, essential visitors to campus, whether it's to pick something up or food services that your student may be participating in. Staff will be required to wear the face coverings when they're entering the campus, just as the public will. Soap and water and hand sanitizing stations are dispersed throughout campus. We will be doing a daily, employees will be filling out a daily COVID-19 symptoms checklist. This is not something that involves a temperature check at this time for the county health department. However, there is a series of symptoms that are related to COVID-19 that staff will be screening themselves for before they begin each shift. And then we're going to be training the personnel on the latest of the county guidance. Next slide, please. So campus access, as I mentioned, it's going to be limited to staff, essential visitors, and we are going to encourage everybody to conduct their business as much as possible via the phone or email, and then students picking up meals. disinfecting on a daily basis, just our high touch services, restrooms, door handles around the campus. And then at the conclusion of the in-school time last year, our staff began to take what is called the Integrated Pest Management course. And once you take that course specific to schools and childcare, it's a subsection just for that. The staff members are permitted through the Department of Pesticide Regulation to then have a disinfecting spray in their classrooms. That spray is something the district will be providing ongoing. We are putting some additional safety measures in place to both help protect the safety of the staff and students, including air filtration that is consistent with the recommendations or beyond based from the County Department of Health. And then food services, which may be a relative concern to some members of our community. All of our staff will be wearing the required PPE. And then vendors, of course, will be having to manage, follow the same guidance. And, you know, in food services, since it is a department that does on a daily basis serve food to the students, practicing strict cleaning protocols is actually the norm in that department. So we really expect things just to continue at the high level that they have been previously. You know, the food service departments, they're monitored also by the county health department, and we have to receive special clearances to operate in there. And you know, they've been holding us at an extremely high level for a number of years. Thank you.
Okay, Amala Ahuja, like Dr. Gallagher introduced, Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services. And I'm going to be talking about a little bit about the back to school options. We're going to explore these two options a little more, virtual and independent learning. I know at our last board meeting, I touched upon the outlines of blended learning, but since this option is currently not available, we really will focus and go a little deeper on these two that are. I'll walk you through the details of the first, virtual learning, and then later on in the presentation, Tasha from Student Services is leading the charge on the independent model, and it will explain that more in depth. So virtual school, this is a slide that's repeated from our last board meeting. I'm just going to go over it really quickly. This applies to both the elementary and the middle school setting. This is very different from the spring distance learning, as is apparent by the fact that we now have state mandated accountability built in, which includes assessment, grading, attendance, and instructional minutes. So we'll be talking about that a little more. The key components, the three key components of the virtual school model, next slide please, are these three: live instruction, asynchronous learning, and independent work. So we're going to talk about live instruction a little more, as there are many ways in which this may be interpreted. From the Sunnyvale lens, a couple of options include referring to this as a workshop model where it combines whole group, small group, and independent work. A possible example could be a teacher is giving a short mini lesson. The length of time will definitely depend on the grade level. First and seventh grade will have absolutely different attention spans. Teachers are definitely cognizant of that. And then the class breaks up into small groups that are doing some independent work based on what the lesson focus is. The teacher could be visiting a couple of small groups during that live instruction block to help out students, and then some other students are working independently. So how this helps is that it really focuses targeted skills, and the teacher is able to differentiate instruction according to the student needs. Our focus in instruction is really on responsive teaching. So this really supports that model very well. Knowing at the middle school that PE and electives are offered as part of the live instruction, they will definitely be using and maybe using a different model. Just wanted to point that out. It's going to look different in different content areas and across different sites. Can you go back to the last slide, please? We're still on that. Asynchronous learning incorporates a variety of activities, and some of these examples include pre-recorded lessons. At the elementary level, this will potentially be science, art, and PE, among others. And then in the middle school level, it's access to online curriculum, for example, TCI for the history, social sciences, and pre-recorded mini lessons that students are able to watch on their own. And the last one is teacher assigned independent work. could be a combination of online and also paper packets. We're really encouraging paper packets as well as online instruction because we want to balance and be really mindful of screen time and what's developmentally appropriate for our students. The other factor is that research has shown and tells us that having more difficult text to read is much better done in print and on a piece of paper or a textbook than it is online. So we want to be mindful of how students are accessing their learning. Okay. So there's embedded accountability, like I referenced. So we are responsible for instructional minutes. So schedules that have been created will account for the required mandates, and those will be shared at the site level because there is a little bit of flexibility within the parameters we've set, and the principals will be sharing that with you. And we have definitely aligned the minutes across all 8 elementary sites and across both the middle schools. Attendance is going to be taken on a daily basis with follow-up on absences. And we do have assessment and grading embedded. So there's formative assessment, which is an ongoing teacher check-in to know how the students are doing so they can be responsive to student needs, and also summative assessments on priority standards and skills so that we can, as a benchmark, know how the whole group is progressing. Regular communication to families regarding the child's progress. So this is not going to be like a report card. That's still going to be on a trimester basis, but the regular communication is going to be through the platforms that are used in the classroom. So if your teacher is using Seesaw, Class Dojo, Google Classroom, there's a variety of ways in which the teacher will be communicating. Next. Thank you. This one, I know it's a little small to read, so I'm going to go over some of what's on the slide. These are distance learning standards for school. This has been set by the state for the parameters within which the distance learning occurs. So the first one is about daily live interaction is required, but there is no set requirement from the state for how long. Our guidance, the one that we are giving in Sunnyvale, is based on what we know is best for students, and the model that we used in summer school. So we field tested the duration in summer school, and it was very successful and really well received. And our summer school teacher team and teacher and leadership team did an amazing job of using this model to help us recommend it for the fall. There is a minimum instruction required, and that's specified based on grade span. So it's different for K, first and second, and then fourth and up. There's a requirement to serve students with special needs. There is a need to have a plan to re-engage students that miss more than 3 days a week. So we're going to be really focused on ensuring attendance and engagement. And there'll be follow-up for students that are not engaged, because we want to do all we can to make sure and prevent a learning loss. Ensuring device access and internet connectivity is on the list. Keeping weekly engagement records is an additional data requirement. This records how much synchronous or asynchronous instruction a student has received. We also have a new requirement to submit a learning continuity and attendance plan that provides information in lieu of the LCAP that has been put on hold for this year. Next. 4 likely conditions. This is a slide that kind of tells us what we're preparing for. So right now we know we're in condition 1. There is virtual school and our campuses are closed. So we have to be prepared for conditions to change, and being proactive and ready for these conditions will really help us. So rather than be reactive when conditions change, we want to have a plan and a roadmap for where we want to go, because our ultimate goal definitely is to be in the green where full campuses are reopened and all students are there. But we can't possibly jump from 1 to 4, and we need kind of steps along the way. So this gives us an outline, and we've further broken it up a little bit into our phases, which talk about the next slide, which really speak to how we're going to be moving along the path. So this, I know if we take this very literally, it might be a little confusing, because flexibility being one of our core principles is going to be a key player in this. So when we have campuses closed, all campuses closed, but they're still open for staff, possibly. They're closed for students. Then campuses can be open for a small number of students, and then campuses can be open for a larger number of students. And we will have some criteria on when and how that happens. There is no timeline associated, so we're not going with in 2 weeks, we're gonna go from phase A to phase B in another 4 weeks, because there are so many unknowns in this condition that we want to be careful about, putting a timeline. But we also want to be mindful that, as teachers are focusing on building classroom community and checking in with small groups virtually, it's all towards the end of building that classroom community as a whole. There's regular follow-up. Principals, teachers, admin staff are all going to be engaged in making sure they follow up with students and families that are not engaged. Identifying some criteria for vulnerable populations, so that when we move on to phase B, when health conditions, teacher access, readability, and families being agreeable occurs, we're ready for possibly one-on-one assessments, or small couple of students in a classroom, just different scenarios that could possibly take place. As we move slowly, and then maybe the couple of students becomes a small group, because we want to make sure we're meeting the needs. And our focus on equity really embraces the goal of being mindful of our vulnerable populations and students for whom virtual learning is not an option, despite all our best efforts. Next. So ongoing support that's being provided for students and families. We're definitely continuing with the food service, with device checkout, with additional materials as needed. As I mentioned, we are proposing, balance, a combination of paper, pencil, and device use, so that we will need additional materials that we will be sharing with families. And then we will also be conducting a parent education session on the use of tech tools. You will get a flyer for this very shortly, but just today, hot off the press, it has been confirmed for August 11th at 6 o'clock. And what we're going to do is the tech tools that we've identified that were really the most useful, and we tested them in summer. We're going to be giving a presentation so that you, from the parent lens, will know how can you support your student at home when they're using Seesaw or Class Dojo or Flipgrid or Google Classroom. So that's the goal. It'll be, larger overview, obviously, for the entire district, and then with the expectation that follow-up sessions will take place and occur at the school sites, because we want to fully support you as you support your students. This is a true partnership, that we're aiming for. The next one, thank you. And of course, we know our staff need, and expect and should be provided with the maximum support we can give them. I'm going to touch on a few things over here. We've created an online resource bank, because we want to make sure that not everyone is reinventing the wheel. So for many years now, it's been about 10 years since we focused on professional learning communities at the site level, and we're expanding that to a professional learning community across the district. So first grade across the district can have access to the resources that a teacher at Cherry Chase or at Lakewood has, come up with. So they're teaching the same material. So there's no need to everyone be making different things, because we know time is of essence. So that online resource bank will be really helpful for teachers to access. We also have an elementary and a middle school task force that was established, coordinated, and led by two amazing ex-principals, Marybeth Allman and Christina Ballantyne, that we're so fortunate to have at the district level. And the overarching purpose is that we recognize and understand that there has to be a change in the instructional program, and the impact is going to really affect the breadth of content that's taught. So we want to focus on depth and not breadth. And so the teams are focusing on identifying priority standards, doing some standards mapping, planning for the first few weeks of school, and a host of things to make it easier for teachers as they start off this most unusual school year. We have some examples from the kindergarten team that's working on, how we're going to do 3 hours. I mean, the attention span of a kindergartner is probably about 8 to 10 minutes maybe at a time. So how are we going to make that live instruction work for them? In second grade is having another conversation about what's appropriate for a second grader. There's a middle school math team that has worked really hard and have prioritized standards. So we are breaking up our standards, our state standards, into what we really want students to have mastery of, what we want them to have awareness of, and what we need to possibly not have if time does not permit. So we can really go in depth. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work going on to support our teachers. We also have a very, very robust professional development offering. This summer, I shared some numbers with you last time, and those have grown exponentially since then. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time, August 4th rolls around, we'll have about 1,000 different, participants in our different sessions, which is really exciting. And we've also talked a little bit about having Wednesdays being, when you get schedules, Wednesdays are, the afternoons are focused on professional development. So teachers will have time to collaborate, have some, offerings of PD they can participate in. So there's ongoing support for them. In addition, we will be having some after school workshops for our teachers, because as students are returning to school, we know that there will be a diversity of academic and mental health needs, and early identification of learning needs and academic or mental health support needed is really important. And once we do that, because we know that there could be significant learning gaps, we want to embed social emotional learning as a part of all classroom activities and remote learning. We've heard from many of you parents that have talked about the importance of socializing, and the fact that students, we don't want them to be isolated. So we've had those conversations as we're building our plan, is how we can have small groups virtually connect students to each other so that there isn't that isolation piece. And even in all the asynchronous and synchronous lessons on many topics that are definitely include core content, but we also, will include lessons on mindfulness, fostering resilience, especially during adversity, and self-advocacy, because those are needs for our students and our staff as well. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Tasha to take over independent study. Thank you.
Thank you, Mala. Good evening, community. I'm Tasha Dean, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, and I'm going to highlight some unique areas with regards to independent study. So as you process this information, think carefully about the information that Mala has so nicely outlined. And what I'm attempting to do here is to point out what's unique and different so you can differentiate the two learning platforms for your children's needs. So with independent study, it is going to be consistent with their district's course of study. That's really important. It is not an alternative curriculum. It's an alternative format, but not a curriculum. Families who are interested in this particular option, it's really important to think about these 4 questions here on the screen. Is there evidence that the student can work alone? Is the student responsible for independent assignments? Can the student commit to attending weekly meetings at a set time with his or her independent study teacher? And then lastly, does the student have access to space, whether that be at home or somewhere else, to be able to work quietly and independently as they need to? So these are very critical questions, and these are questions that are actually outlined by the state of California as we are responsible for being in compliance with an independent study program. So the process for that is that if in fact you answer no to any of these questions, at that point it's always important, but it becomes more important to have a conversation with your classroom teacher and site administrator about whether or not this would be an appropriate option for your son or daughter. Next slide, please. Some additional components that are aligned in the independent study program. Students and families, as appropriate, do attend an entry meeting with their independent study teacher. That meeting is designed to provide an orientation to independent study with details about expectations regarding assignments and checking in, getting a schedule aligned with the teacher, things of that nature. And so that contract is written up, and it's going to be signed by the teacher, the administrator, the parent, as well as the student. And that's the agreement for the student's independent study program. In addition to that, that contract will include details about when you're meeting, what the weekly content will look like, how you're going to access that information. Mala talked about training and details that will be available. Similar types of training will be available to parents. There is a parent platform, and I'll talk about a program we're going to be using to support independent study teachers and students in that program, in addition to the supports that Mala has already described. The other aspects that will be there will be, for this program, it would be a commitment for a trimester. And the exception to that commitment would be that if the student begins an independent study program and based upon performance or other issues, the teacher and or parent and student together will make a determination that that may not be an appropriate option moving forward. And those are some of the details that are gone into detail with in that orientation meeting. Like other students will have access to breakfast and lunch bundles, or however we are delivering lunch and meal programs to our other students during this time. That will change according to regulations, but they will be eligible for those supports as well. Next slide. So just to highlight here again, talked about expectations for distance learning standards. And so I've circled daily live interaction required. As we talk about independent study, that is not going to be a daily requirement in independent study. There will be the weekly check-in, but an expectation for daily live interaction will not be required according to state guidelines. Next slide. And then the next area, minimum instruction. And while the instruction will be compatible in independent study, the big distinction is it's going to be based upon a combination of assigned work and activities that will be designed on the platform that will be being utilized, which I'll talk to in just a bit. But the expectations for the academic time on work is consistent with the guidelines that are listed. So ACELUS, this is a program that we're using. It will be new for us this year, and we're utilizing it to augment the work that would be needed in order to provide an independent study program. So the program will provide learning opportunities in the core academic areas. The exception to that would be physical education, which will be designed by district teacher and integrated into the platform that's being utilized. So the work will be there for physical education, but that content is not directly in the program specifically. The program is something that's being used across the country, and we do have districts around us, but not specifically in Santa Clara County at the moment anyway, but some are considering it. But we do have many in California that are utilizing this program. And it is aligned to provide not only the academic instruction that's required by the state, but it also does provide some level of remediation and grade level acceleration for students who may require a little bit more work or just have a desire to do more because they're interested. So that kind of completes the kind of the core of the independent study, and I'm sure we'll talk more as we get to questions, but I wanted to really just kind of highlight what was unique and different. So with that, we wanted to kind of close this piece out with a reminder about our social emotional learning. Mala talked about in the importance of embedding this throughout instruction and in the classrooms as teachers are providing morning circles, afternoon close, however they're going to be doing that. But the essence is it is to be embedded, and we want to support that being embedded throughout the instructional day. So the other piece we wanted to kind of highlight is we are being very sensitive to the fact that the pandemic has resulted in different types of trauma, not only trauma for our students, but for our staff as well. And so we want to be sensitive to that. Through a human resources department, we're trying to provide support to staff who may have needs there. With regards to students, they may come in different ways. And even though we're still virtual, we still want to be sensitive to that. We want to provide our staff with information to kind of maybe recognize when some of those needs are present as they're working with students, and be able to utilize the district supports we have, whether that be through our chat counseling, through our district social workers, or other outside agencies. We want to be able to connect those students to supports that they may need. In addition to that, we wanted to emphasize that we will continue to provide the supports that we always have with regards to identifying students who may have more intensive mental health needs, also providing support and training around trauma-informed practices that we need to. And then also, it's very important, and Molly emphasized that a few times, and I want to kind of end with doing that again, is we are definitely doing this work in partner with our students and our families. It's very important so that we can be sure that we're providing the supports we need academically, but also with the social emotional needs that may be present. And so with that, that kind of concludes our foundational information. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Gallagher.
Mike, you're muted.
Oh, you missed all the good stuff I said. Sorry about that. I'll say it again. I want to thank the team for putting together this presentation. I know, again, it's hours and hours of work, starting and stopping and starting over, but I really appreciate it. This is exactly the same presentation that will be presented to the Board of Education on Thursday night. We wanted to have this opportunity to present it specifically to parents. It is being recorded, so it'll be available to parents who weren't able to come attend this particular meeting. We have a cap of 1,000 participants, but there's also streaming on Facebook, but it will be recorded as well. We are going to stop at 7:30 tonight. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, I think we need to be cognizant of people's time. Also, our interpretation services, that's when that ends. So we need to be cognizant of that so that it's fair to everyone. So what I would ask the people asking questions to do is to ask one question out of fairness, because we already have a good 15 people with their hands raised, and be as concise as you can in asking the question. And finally, the last thing I would say is, a meeting like this, ordinarily, we would do it through school sites. So we would have maybe 10 of these at each of the school sites, and principals would be leading it, and they'd be able to answer questions specifically for that particular school site. So some of the questions are going to be answered with, well, that's something that you'll discuss with your principal. Your principal will discuss with your parent community. And today is their first day back. So we're being cognizant of that. So with that, if you could just, again, limit your questions to one question per person so we can get through all the questions, and then about a minute each, and then we'll get as much done as we can. So Aaliyah will be moderating. So go for it, Aaliyah.
Perfect. Okay, so first up is Brooke Stryshock, then it'll be Marisol and Ashok. But first, let's see. Oh, Brooke, I need to promote you to panelist, it looks like. If you can go ahead and unmute yourself, you should be able to talk.
Great, thank you so much. Just kind of quickly, I know I was kind of looking at this myself, and I have an incoming first and fourth grader, and I'm looking at a minimum of at least 4 hours a day, probably 6 hours a day if I'm going to help both of them, of sitting side by side with my child, which is a full-time job. So I'm just hoping that there's been some thought around some innovation, because I know that there's households who can't support the bandwidth of multiple students and multiple jobs, so they won't be able to be online at the same time. Additionally, families that are working outside the home, kids that have to go to daycare, won't be able to access if we all are on at one time. I know there's union rules and teachers' needs, but I'm just wondering if there's been any thought around maybe having one class of an alternative schedule that maybe meets in the afternoons and evenings, so that we can have room for every single student and nobody gets left behind, especially if you're following up on all of these all the kids. And then my last thing, sort of off subject, is there was a question about everybody on Facebook who wants to ask questions. Are they going to be answered? Thank you.
Who'd like to take that question? About teachers with alternate schedules. Mala, why don't you take a shot at it?
I think I'll channel HR then and see if that's even feasible. But it's a great suggestion. I think we need to be mindful of bandwidth in homes, and if it's possible, I think we can definitely have a conversation about it. And I'm not sure about the Facebook questions. Aliyah is going to be moderating that piece. So as many as we can get in, we'd love to be able to answer today. That's our goal.
And then Brooke, if you can actually move back to be an attendee, that'll enable me if I need to add someone else as a panelist. Thank you. Next up is Marisol, who, yes, I need to promote to panelist. Let's see if I can do. There you are. Your camera's on, just FYI. If you don't mind.
Hablo español.
See?
Sherlyn, can you switch back over to the English channel so we can, or can folks click on English on the interpretation? Can you hear okay?
Yes.
Okay, you're good. Thank you, Sherlyn.
Yes.
¿Ya puedo hablar?
Sí.
Sí, thank you. Bueno, tengo aquí unos puntos que yo anoté con respecto a lo que nos estuvieron hablando ahorita. Es de suma importancia saber el tiempo que van a estar en la escuela, en lo que es la clase virtual, ya que deberemos considerar que cuando empezó esto, pues muchas madres de familia dejamos de trabajar y pudimos apoyar a nuestros hijos para estar haciendo los trabajos escolares. Ahora todo cambió. Muchas madres ahora ya no vamos a estar con ellos, van a tener sus clases virtuales, tenemos que estar trabajando y no vamos a darnos cuenta realmente del aprendizaje que ellos van a estar absorbiendo sobre la clase virtual. Quería ver, bueno, una posibilidad de ver cómo nos pueden ayudar a las madres de familia para poder estar al nivel. Sé que es un reto muy grande para ustedes, pero necesitamos estar como que bien coordinados para que podamos ayudar también nosotros a los estudiantes. La segunda son las evaluaciones. Sé que también es algo muy, muy difícil de llevar ahorita con todo este reto que tenemos todos, pero es de suma importancia también saber que los estudiantes estén aprendiendo, porque no es lo mismo tomar la clase virtual y quedarse con la idea de que está aprendiendo el niño y realmente no sabemos cómo vamos a ayudar a nuestros estudiantes para saber si está absorbiendo toda la enseñanza que le está proveyendo el profesor. La segunda es en los materiales. Yo tuve una experiencia con las clases virtuales porque el maestro proporcionaba material vía internet y uno lo tenía que imprimir y en ocasiones los materiales no se pueden imprimir bien y bueno, tiende uno a tener que estar escribiendo todo y muchas veces nos atrasamos. Tenemos que atrasar
we were
la
very
actividad
behind
porque no
because of
podíamos
that,
imprimir bien y
because
uno
we
como madre
couldn't
tiene que
print all
ponerse a
the
escribirlo, a tratar
documents,
de hacer el
and
mejor diseño posible
as
para que
parents, we had to write
los
everything
alumnos
down
puedan
so
trabajar.
that
La
the
otra es el
students could
contenido de la
really
información
take advantage of this.
semanal,
The
cómo va a
other
ser,
thing
ya
is
que muchas
information that you
veces,
send
como les menciono,
every
vamos a estar
week,
trabajando los padres de familia
because
y
most
quizás
of
no
us are going to
vayamos
be working
a poder
outside,
apoyarlos
and we're not going to
a
be able
realizar todas
to
sus
support
actividades.
them all the time
La
with
otra
all their activities.
es un reto saber si es satisfactorio
And
el
it's a
aprendizaje
challenge,
virtual, ya que pues
and we want to
ahorita
know if
todas
they're
las
going to
cosas han
really
mejorado y creo
going to
que
be
gracias a
learning
ustedes se está
virtually. I think
logrando, pero
things
creo que
have
es un
been
reto
improved,
muy
but I think
importante el
this is
saber
a
que
big
la clase
challenge.
virtual ayude a
And we need
nuestros
to know
estudiantes.
if these
Y
virtual classes are really
emocionalmente,
going
bueno,
to
yo les
help.
quisiera
And
compartir algo ahora
emotionally,
que ya
I
están
want to share
mencionando en las
something.
noticias que vamos a estar con el regreso a clases.
You
Tengo un
have
hijo
been
que
saying
tiene
that we're
asma y
gonna
por ende
go
no iba a
back to
asistir a
school, and I
escuela.
have
Iba
a
a tomar la
son,
clase
he has
virtual, ya
asthma,
era
so
una
he was
decisión
just
tomada
gonna
desde hace
take
tiempo.
virtual
Pero
classes.
también
That's
hay
a
niños que
decision that we
emocionalmente
made,
están
but there are other
mal
children
porque están esperando como
that
su
are not
regreso a
doing well
clases, como el
emotionally
mío.
because
Y me dice, ay,
they are
al ver
really
la noticia,
excited
él
to go
dijo,
back to
oh, ya
school.
vamos a
And when
regresar a la
he
escuela,
heard the
mamá, qué
news, he was
padre.
very
But if she could
excited.
please just wrap up your thought, just because we're trying to keep it to 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay,
If she could just
sorry.
wrap up her thought really quick.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. I'll go ahead and move on to the next one, which is
Can we just acknowledge Marisol?
yes, by all means.
Thank you. So Marisol, we really appreciate and acknowledge the challenge. We understand it's a really big challenge, and we are going to be speaking with Mr. Ibarra, the new principal, and we're going to have community gathering, a session, something where we're going to hear specific concerns for the San Miguel community for the Juntos program, and we'd love to hear ways in which our hands are also tied. As much as we'd love to be able to support you as working parents, we understand right now because of the safety we have to stay with a virtual model, but it doesn't mean we can't do the best we can to accommodate and listen and see what we can find as ways to support your family.
Gracias, muy amable. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Marisol. Appreciate it. Next up is Ashok, and then after that is Socorro Gurola. Can you go ahead and unmute yourself, Ashok?
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I have the question. So what is this virtual and the independent school plan? So you decided. So initially it is both the plans is for the 6 weeks, or like it will, or like it will. You have some specific timeline, like it will go for a quarter or 6 months or something. Like there is any difference between these two type of learning?
I can jump in if you're picking between virtual school or the independent study program. The independent study program would be for the first trimester, and then we would kind of reevaluate at that time. But we just try to, when students are moving back and forth between the two programs, there is potential disruption with the virtual program. So if you select and the independent study program is right for you, it would be for a trimester. And then I think the broader question about how long we are going to be in virtual school setting is really dependent on factors that are kind of outside our control, but we will be assessing that along the way and adjusting as conditions shift around us. And we will definitely communicate that ahead of time as we make plans to shift. And I think those were some of the, we have to be flexible in that regard. So.
Thank you, Jeremy. And next up is Socorro Gurola, and then after that is Katie Rowland. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Socorro. Or I can unmute you if you want to go ahead and speak.
Pues Yo tengo nomás
Sure.
una pregunta.
Well, I have a question, just one question.
Please
Can you
go
hear
ahead.
me?
Yes.
Well, I would like to have these virtual classes because I'm afraid that my children could get infected if they go to school on site, and my husband has diabetes. So I'm afraid of that. But that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time. Next up is Katie Rowland.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for taking this time to talk with all of us. I know we all have a lot of questions, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken. I did just give some feedback that I think I hope will be useful, which is it isn't really clear from this presentation what independent study will look like. Specifically at presentations in the past, you have stated that the curriculum would be provided by the district and instruction would be provided by the family. But it isn't clear exactly what the school district or school site will be providing in terms of resources, or what you mean when you say provide the curriculum. For example, I've looked at the school district website and I've seen a list of approved curriculum on that page, but I don't know if that's what you mean or if there's something else that you're providing. It is equally unclear to me what it means when you say that we as families provide the instruction. For instance, you say that, but then you say attendance is based on the number of assignments, and you're talking about using a CELUS as well. So I'm actually not clear whether I have the flexibility that I desire to best support my daughter in her learning, and that in turn makes it very hard to make a selection by the August 3rd date. And I understand we have an orientation meeting, but that's going to be after we've made our selection. But my question to you all is actually specific to the Juntos program. A lot of us at the Juntos program really confused about how this applies to us. For example, can we do independent study as a Juntos student, provided we can support them in Spanish? And if so, can we be paired with a Spanish-speaking teacher to best support our students' education? Thank you.
So with regards to the Juntos program, I know that Mala's planning a community meeting with the leadership at the San Miguel School. But with regards to independent study, with that specialized program, that would not be aligned with independent study because of the uniqueness and the particulars of the Juntos program. With regards to the other questions, we will definitely follow up with additional details, but as it relates to Juntos, it would not be aligned for that program.
Okay, next up is Lupe Escareno, and then after that is Dipali Suri. Lupe, if you want to go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
So thank you so much for that presentation. Just really quickly, I just heard Tasha just mentioned that for the Juntos program, the independent study, it just wouldn't align. I'm a little saddened on that because I'm a full-time working mom, and unfortunately the virtual model wouldn't, I mean, how am I going to get my son to, watch, the teacher live from 8 to whatever times that you guys had? That would be the biggest issue for me, going back to work August 1st. The biggest thing that I did have a question on as well, a lot of the CDC daycares, there's one in Vargas, there's one in every site. They also are kind of stuck on what guidance they're going to get, because I know I'm a full-time working mom, and my son's going to be in daycare for this, and I want him to do the virtual model, because he's in the Juntos program. So not sure if how they're going to be given guidance on if they're going to support all these students that are going to be this virtual learning on site on their sites, because like I said, I'm a full-time working mom. There's no way I can have them in my home and watching videos, and how am I supposed to go to work? So that's the biggest challenge for us working parents. And I'm a little saddened on the independent study situation on the Juntos, because I'm a fluent Spanish speaker, so I'm more than willing to, get my son up to speed on, that program. So like I said, the biggest question is, what type of guidance will these daycares be given for us full-time parents, to support this virtual learning? Thank you.
Rob, I don't know if you want to, you've talked to CDC a little bit. I don't know if there's any progress there on what their program might be for school-age kids during the school day.
You know, I've had some initial conversations with them and actually just pinged them earlier today to hopefully get back some information from them that I'm looking for as far as what their capacity to serve is and how they envision the school day looking. So, you know, at this moment, I don't have any concrete information from them.
Would say there's a little bit of hope though, and sometimes I'm overly optimistic.
Beyond hope, there was a strong interest on their end to find a way to make something happen.
Okay, good.
I think they were really, you know, looking at beyond the cohort requirements that they have, or the stable cohorts that child care centers are required to have. I think they were also making some, you know, logistical strategies to even have it be a little more grade level clusters. So what was kind of occurring for the students during their virtual learning would hopefully be closely aligned to the other kids who were inside of that stable cohort as well.
Thank you. Next up, and then just to clarify, for those of you, if you're English speakers and wanting to hear the Spanish translation, if you go to the global icon on the bottom and click on English, you'll be able to hear the Spanish speakers being translated in reverse, just FYI. Next person is Dipali Suri, followed by Oilam Ispir.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks a lot for the presentation, for all the updates you provided this evening. We really appreciate this. So while I understand the 6 weeks is going to be all virtual or independent study, I just wanted a little more clarity, because still a few weeks back we were talking about these various options that the families will get via a packet or an email that we need to respond to. So beyond 6 weeks, I just want to make sure, will there still be that option for families, let's say, who are not comfortable sending their kids to school, whenever you meet that, you know, requirement to go from condition 1 to 2, etc. I couldn't follow all the details there, which looks like a really nice methodical approach you guys have taken. But I just want to make sure, while you go from these different conditions, will families be still given a clear option like we discussed last time, of picking and choosing those options?
Yes, I can answer that. You know, many districts are pushing out past 6 weeks to the full trimester, or even to the end of the calendar year, and they're doing that because they're anticipating that that's how long conditions will warrant it. And again, I tend to be optimistic, but I think that may be a more realistic timeline at a minimum, to be honest. So to answer your question directly, yes. Even if we were given a green light to return to in-person instruction after 6 weeks, we would have an option available for parents past that for the online instruction or the virtual school.
Okay, next up is Oilam, followed by Veronica Brand. Promote you to panelist just because I think it has to do with settings.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
So thank you, first of all, for all your wonderful efforts and making us informed about what's going to happen in August. Thank you for the hard work. I have 2 questions about the independent study. The first one is, as far as I know, in California system, a student is allowed to have only 1 time for independent study. So if I would choose this independent study option, is it specific to COVID, or would I have another option for independent study in the near future? That's my first question. And the second one is, I'm wondering, there's a teacher, specific teacher for the independent study. We call this an IS teacher, but in the virtual class option, does every student attend the class having 3rd grade? My daughter will go to 3rd grade teacher. But in the independent study, they have a different teacher. I mean, what's going to happen to this independent study teacher when she just assuming when she starts the school in spring? I hope it's clear. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
I'll take the first half of your question, and maybe Jeremy, you can take the second half. But with regards to the one-time independent study, that's related to short-term independent study. The independent study program is the program, and so that's the distinction. There's short-term and there's long-term independent study. And so the one-time option that you were speaking of that exists in certain places, that's in relationship to short-term independent study.
And then your question regarding the eventual switch back if conditions change and we go in-person blended, and the shift between independent study and virtual, that we know that's going to be kind of a logistical challenge when that comes. And so we are really taking a look at trying to stabilize the independent study group for at least the first trimester, because that'll give us plenty of time to understand what condition would be for try 2 if they are returning back to virtual or in person, and then we could reconfigure based off of the number of students in independent study and the number of independent study teachers. And so we are actually for all staff using, I think Mike talked about it, kind of that flexible model, but we can't have it flexible from week to week. So we are looking at these defined timeframes in order for us to make as orderly shifts as possible. And then just to make things even more complicated, we are trying to plan for the inevitable where we do have even new registrants starting the school year once we open the school year in virtual setting as well. So we're trying to account for all of those variables.
And then Oilam, I apologize. In order to remove you as a panelist, I have to remove you entirely, it seems. I don't have a better option, but you should be able to log back on. So sorry about that. Next up is Veronica Brand, and after that will be Joy Gore.
Hi, my name is Veronica. I'm another parent from San Miguel in the Juntos program. So I have questions about that. Unfortunately, it seems like neither option is really viable for my son. So in the spring, asking him to be on a live Zoom call for 30 minutes a day was about the max of that what he was able to do. And so I'm very concerned about how much time they're expected to be on live instruction as a first grader. And so I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about what I could expect for my first grader versus, a fifth grader. Because the schedule that was posted online is just a generic schedule, and it's very concerning to me as a parent.
I can quickly share a little more. Please know that this is just an example I'm going to give you, and the school will determine exactly what the schedule looks like. But what we are looking for is starting off the school day with the teacher having a live instruction for a period of about 2.5 hours, but please don't panic. 2.5 hours doesn't mean that the child's going to be paying attention on the camera for 2.5 hours. We know that's not appropriate for a first grader, and not really even, the best option for a fifth grader. So within that 2.5 hour block, the teacher will give 15 to 20 minute opening, like a morning circle, a lesson to the class, and then do a mini lesson on a focused content, whether it's language literacy or math. 15 or 20 minutes at the most, and then the students are going to be working independently. The teacher, the mic can be off. The teacher will then go into small groups and work with a couple of small groups to do targeted instruction based on the students' needs, while the rest of the students are working, either on something online or on paper pencil activity, all connected to the focus of that lesson for that morning. There are breaks in the day, there's recess included in the schedule. It's going to mimic kind of a regular school day in a strange way because all the content area is going to be embedded, but the live instruction, the online portion is going to be chunked out for the course of the day based on the developmentally appropriate age of the child. So they're not going to be looking into the camera the whole day and sitting on Zoom all day long. Does that help at all?
I think I've already moved on to the next speaker, but sorry. Thank you, Mala. I believe next up was Joy Gore, and then Tria's after that.
Hi, I'm Joy. First of all, thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing to be able to balance so many different perspectives and needs. The question that I have is, our preschool is looking into supporting our kindergartners while school is remote. And so they're looking at whether they would need to do an independent study. And if we did do that, then would we be locked into that for the full trimester? So if we were able to get back to school and in person, would we be locked into independent study and not be able to come back to school? And then the second very related piece is my other son is a third grader, and they're looking at doing work groups. Does it seem like it would be possible to do the virtual study if you have a handful of third graders who have different teachers, all trying to study together in the same place?
I'll take the trimester question on independent study first. That would be our intention, is to make that shift at that time. That may not line up directly with the information that we're getting on conditions on reopening, but trimester 1 is our best guess for that next assessment to switch back out of independent study into virtual school, or whatever option we have at that time.
And for the second portion of the question, not having a crystal ball, I would say it would be really helpful if your principal knows about these plans, because I think we're all going to work together in doing everything we can to support families. So if it's feasible, because a lot depends on placement, teachers, and alignment across the grade level. So I would highly recommend you have a conversation with your school principal about this.
Thank you both. Next up, we have Tria, I apologize if I mispronounced that, and Akshara Sahu is after that.
Okay. Hi, this is Tria. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Again, I want to echo what everybody else has said so far. Thank you so much for all of the work that you've put in. Couldn't have been easy coordinating online as well, and we appreciate it as parents. Thank you. For our family, we are considering the independent study option at this point, and I'm just concerned about the software requirement and such. We've been a device-free family until this pandemic hit, and then our child was suddenly exposed to devices, and we don't have devices that are appropriate for kids in our family at all. And I noticed in the mailer, we received the mailer yesterday, it said that the option to receive a device through the school was available for virtual school and not for independent study. So that was one question I had about using this Acela software. I wouldn't know how to, I mean, we don't have a device, A, and B, even if we did, I wouldn't know how to keep it safe, if you know what I mean. And I know last time we borrowed an equipment from school, and that was helpful because it has all the safety settings. It doesn't let students access other stuff that they're not required to, that they don't need to. So I was wondering if that option would be available for independent study families as well. And as a continuation of the same question, so will it all be online through the software, or will there be material, pen, paper stuff that children will have to do, even if it is independent study? So if you could address that, that'll be helpful. Thank you.
Yep. Let me jump in then. Number one question, yes, computer and internet access is for either virtual school or independent study. I think we got a little too clever with we tried to simplify it by saying the virtual learning program, which encompassed both. So I apologize for that confusion. So if you do need that, make sure you indicate that. Internet and or computers will be provided for either virtual school or independent study. I repeat, option is made available for both. Tasha, on the mix of materials, please.
Yes. And with regards to the instruction, it will be a combination of blended learning opportunities, paper and pen, reading, information on online, a combination. And the Acela 2 would be a portal to house many of those activities. However, some activities might be needing to be delivered to students directly. It's going to depend on the learning plans outlined by each of the teachers for each of the students.
Thank you both. Next up, we have Akshara Sahu, and then after that is Marisol Chang.
Hi, do you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So I have a very quick question regarding a device again. So my kid would be going to the kindergarten, and then this first time experience with any kind of device, learning through device. So so what kind of device are we talking about? Do we really need a laptop or any tablet or iPad, or what kind of OS, what platform it should have? There is no specification on the packet that I received yesterday. So if you can just quickly.
So my recommendation would be, there's the instruction has done a great job over the past actually 6 months to really refine the number of instructional technology applications we're utilizing. And so I know a Chromebook would be probably the basis of what you would need, but if I would encourage you to attend the instruction tech night, the parent night that Mala was alluding to. In addition, different school sites, once you start getting information directly from them, will be able to communicate the device pickup, because some sites have a mixture of iPads and Chromebooks as well. So, because at the very least, if you do need a device, then just a district device would be provided that would be work with the district application suite.
Okay, so again, we're gonna aim to end right about 7:30, and there's 63 more questions, so there's no way we'd be able to get to that. That'd take another couple hours probably. So we're going to, Aaliyah will put the email address that you can send additional questions to. If we don't get to your question, she'll put that in the chat, and we'll just keep going until we can, until like right around 7:30.
Yes, the email is covid19concerns@sescd.org, or you can call our main line and extension 1107. So it's 408-522-8200, 1107, and we will get back to you. And you can always check back on our website, FAQs, as we'll continue to update that. So with that, we will move on to Marisol Chang, and after that is Jenny Richardson.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. My son will be starting first grade, and he is an English learner. So I was wondering how English learners are going to be supported throughout either virtual school or independent study. Thank you.
I can address that. In virtual school, we have in the schedules that teachers are creating, there is a designated time for English language development. It's a requirement, by the state, and it's something we know that is right for students. So that will be done in the classroom, virtually or in person. And the independent study, I'll have Tasha address how that's taken care of.
That will be addressed through the master agreements. And so for students who need that, that will let the teacher know how to integrate that into the individualized learning plan for the student. There will be some content that they may put into their learning portal, or there may be some other activities, but that's how that will be addressed. And what they use and how they use it will be aligned to the ELD standards of the district.
Thank you both. Next up is Jenny Richardson, and after that is Upad Haye. Apologize if I mispronounced that.
Thanks for taking my call or my question. So just a quick comment. I think while the information was good tonight, it lacked a lot of the details that we need as parents to plan our day-to-days. And the sooner we can get that, the better. So the question is, if we're promising robust and vigorous education, then why are we dropping some of the state standards? And will parents be told which of these standards are dropped so we can help fill in the gaps? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And let me clarify, we're focusing on depth, which means we're really teaching the standards that are really important very well. And that's our focus area. We're not saying we will not be teaching everything, but really focusing on the depth is the important thing. So we're not going to be spending time on assessments and revisiting or re-engaging in standards that are not essential for mastery, knowing that that's the most important thing for them to know at their level, at their grade level that's appropriate.
And next up is Pupadhai, I'm sorry. And the next up is Tegan Lohman. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. You'll be able to speak next. Or I can try unmuting you as well. That doesn't seem to be working. I apologize. You can always email us directly, as I mentioned, at COVID-19 concerns at scsd.org. I'll go ahead and move on to the next one. Tegan Lohman.
Hi, yes, thank you. So I'm a mom of an incoming kindergartner. I think you guys know there was a communication problem, and I know the software is terrible, so I don't blame you for it, but I didn't get any communication from the district until this week. I don't know what virtual school looked like. I don't know what summer school looked like. And the elaboration Mala provided was helpful, but I don't feel like I have anywhere near enough information to make a decision for my child. And I'm wondering how we can get more information within the next week so that, you know, we can make an informed choice.
I guess, Tegan, I'll jump in on the communication aspect. Yeah, we took a little bit of time to unwind that, but I'm glad that's flowing. To be honest, this is the progression of information we've been putting out regarding the instructional models is kind of what we've been launching this week in addition to the mailer. I'm looking over to Mala a little bit too, like I'm wondering, you know, additional information that might be coming out, but the options that you would have at the moment would be opt-in for independent study or the virtual school program. And again, this is the information that, again, just started to come out at the end of last week. So that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next up is Susie Woodley, and after that is Heather Osborne.
Hello.
Hello.
I have two questions. Somebody already went over one of them, but just want to clarify. I would prefer my son he's in third grade, to be in virtual all year long. I don't want to do independent study. So if you go back to blended at some point in time, would we have the option to stay virtual, or would we have to change over to independent study not to go? And then my second question is, I'm actually a little disappointed that we're using an online school for independent study. I would prefer teacher-created curriculum that was sent home, like the packets or the textbooks that are being directly used, the same curriculum that would be used with the other students, versus an online program which is different curriculum, even though it's the same content. So I don't really want to do the independent study program at any time, but I also don't want my son currently on campus. Those are my two questions.
I guess I'll jump in about how the school year will end. It's really anyone's guess how the school year will end. I would expect that there would be a virtual school option through June. That would be, I think, a pretty fair bet, but I wouldn't, it's just hard to know how things are going to evolve. But hopefully that puts your mind at ease a little bit. That would be my guess, is that we'd at least have that option for the duration of the school year.
Thank you, Mike. And I believe our last question, just because we are already at 7:28, is going to be Heather Osborne. Heather, if you want to go ahead. But as we mentioned, please email us, call us, and more information will be forthcoming in the mail if you haven't already received it this week with more details. Heather, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, hello, thank you. I'll have a second grader at Cumberland, a sixth grader at SMS, and a seventh grader at SMS. And I have been a volunteer for many years at Cumberland, and I'm just wondering if there's going to be a way for us to get volunteers back in the classroom somehow. I don't know if you can let us get on the Zoom calls and work in small groups. I know there are privacy concerns, but that's something that I think would be really great. And I think there are parents that might have more time than ever to spend an hour or more every week in the classroom. And this also relates to some of the great PTA programs like Project Cornerstone. So we'd love to be able to get those up and running to help support the schools and the teachers and the kids.
I would say that's something we're going to have to investigate. I agree. That would be great. However much we can use volunteers, especially, people who are willing to help out. We'll just have to investigate what the legal parameters are around that. That's a new situation we're in. Aaliyah, are we at the end?
We are, and I just wanted to announce that we are keeping a log of all of the Facebook comments and questions, so we'll be sharing that with each other as a team, just as we continue our planning, and we'll do our best to try to answer them in our FAQ as we continue to update them. And you can always email us, call us, and we'll try to get back to you the best we can.
Okay. Thank you everyone for participating. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to every single question, but as Aaliyah said, if you send them in to that email address, which is in the chat, or leave a message on, actually sending them via email is a little bit better than the phone call message. We will get back to them and add them to our FAQ, which is on our website. And then also, now that the principals are back at schools just today, and getting caught up on everything that's going on, they'll be able to start addressing a lot of the more individual school questions that come up. We will be continuing to do everything we can to provide information to the community as we move forward. The good news is that we do have a settled program now for the coming school year that we've laid out for you here today, and we'll use your comments and your questions to continue to refine that, to make it the best, most effective possible instructional program that we can. And that will continue as we move through the school year. We promise to keep working at it to get better and better. So thank you very much for your attendance this evening, and have a good evening.